Hey guys, welcome back. So in the previous video, I went over how you can make a kit bash set using 3D Code and Blender. And this time I want to use that kit that I made last week to actually make an environment shot. And I also mentioned in the last video that ideally I want to do at least 3 to 4 shots with this, starting with like an aerial shot, an establishing shot, a close-up, and then an interior part. Yeah, that did not work out. I sometimes forget that I have a full-time job and other responsibilities. But I did manage to make one image, which is this right here, and I was really happy with how it turned out. I do feel like I want to expand more on this project, so I did not want to rush it as well. Like I'm thinking maybe there could be some more shots, some more exploration within this environment where we go up where the city is and then kind of show the little buildings and the structures up there. So that's the goal. For today though, I'm going to show you guys my Blender file, render passes, all that good stuff. But before we get started, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss out any videos that I put out. Because clearly 80% of y'all are not subscribed, but you're watching my videos. How does that make sense? Anyways, let's get started. So the first thing that I like to do is I like to create my scene in a separate file, and I like to keep my file where I have my kit separate as well. I feel like it's a little bit easier to manage everything that way. I'm also, even though I have a kit that's already built out, I'm still keeping myself open-minded to the fact that if I have to create more elements, like more pieces, I'm gonna do it. I'm not gonna just make stuff from the kit that I already have, you know? Because then I'm limiting myself and my creativity at that point. And also a lot of this stuff didn't really make any sense either, because I feel like when you start kit bashing, it's so fun and it's so easy to get carried away that you just start making random shit. And that's what happened here. Some of these structures look really cool, but then as far as purpose and functionality goes, I didn't really feel like it was grounded enough for my project. So I ended up going in a different direction. All right, so it's literally so easy to like copy paste models between Blender files. All you gotta do is just click on it, hit Control C, go to your other file and hit Control V. And it pastes it. Yeah, so there you go. It'll paste it whatever your 3D cursor is. So it was, in my case, it was right here. So that's what I did. I pretty much just copy pasted elements from my kit bash set and just went from there. And then once you're done copy pasting, you can just, you know, X out of it for the most part. What was going through my head was, so I was looking at these references, right? Like I wanted an environment shot where there was a path leading you to a place that was higher than the ground, pretty much. You know, something like this, you know, a path of some sort that leads you, and maybe my big structure is kind of up here and everything's like carved inside of these big ass rocks and mountains. And so that's the kind of design I was going for, you know, something like this. And then I'm thinking that on top here, like this stuff right here, this is where like all of these houses are going to be. I have like a few buildings here and there as well, and this is meant to be kind of like the opening shot of the project for the most part. I had a couple pieces that I got. I mean, I had this piece right here, this piece right here. I had some of these spikes up here, and I just scaled them up. And the reason why I have these is just for like blocking out some of the lights so that I can get some shadow on my ground. So let's look at how I lit my scene up. So I am using an HDRI and a sun. So for my HDRI, I'm using an add-on. It's called Gaffer, and it's clicked right here. And pretty much Gaffer comes with a preloaded library of different HDRIs. If I click on it, this is the HDRI that I was using. Set it back. And if I click up here, there's like a bunch. If I only have my HDRI right, if I render this right now, if I preview it, and so the main light is coming from the image itself up here, and I can rotate it to get different, you know, different lighting setup. You can get some really cool results with this. Now, what I was doing is that I decided that it'd be cool. Actually, this is a trick that I learned from Piotr Krinsky's tutorial. It's called efficient environment design. I'm still going through that right now. It's one of the techniques that he was talking about. And so right now, by default, it should be on clamp brightness to 0, right? And from here, if you rotate your HDRI, you can just get different lighting setups, different light directions and whatnot. But what I want the ability to control the light from the sun at my will and not depend on the sun that's from the HDRI. So to do that, I'm going to click on clamp brightness and put it on 1. So now the scene is not being lit up by the HDRI, but there's a little bit of like ambient light up there, if that makes sense. And then if I put a sun here, I'm going to make sure a couple things. First of all, the strength, we're going to bump it up to 12. Something that I learned from his tutorial as well. Now, it was pretty insane because I always had it on like 1 or 2, and that never gave me like good enough lighting. But you got to really pump it up. So for exterior shots, you want to keep it around 12 or 10, 12, 13, something like that. And then what we're gonna do next, we're gonna go to our nodes. Yeah, we'll stay on object and we'll click on the sun and make sure there is emission, light output, and then black body. Now black body, what that does is, let me take that off and show you the difference. See, right now the sun doesn't really have any color, it's just white. You could come up here and like select the color, but then you're gonna run into a lot of issues if you select color from here. So what you want to do instead, if you use black body, you can just put the temperature of the sun and that'll give you like the appropriate color for the day. And if you just Google it real quick, so if you get a chart like this, it'll tell you like the color of your sun in at specific temperatures. I went around 3500 for this, but I feel like that worked really well too, because I got some really nice warm light with very cool shadows. I can rotate my sun, get different variations, and just play around with that and see see whatever shot's working for me. After I had that figured out, I was like, okay, for the sand up here, I used a mesh, a landscape mesh. So you hit mesh, click on landscape, and then from here you click this right here. It's up here. Let's see. Yeah, right here. But I ended up using this for the most part. Go ahead and delete it. And then I just duplicated it all over the place to add a little bit of like bumps here and there. So that was it for the sand. And then all of these pieces up here, these came from the Kit Bash set. I didn't really, so this piece right here. So I used this piece right here and I pretty much just rotated it and then kind of like squashed it like that. There you go. So just like that, I had a ground plane of some sort. And then I could also always like reuse it for some rocks on the side. And the one thing that's really important when you're working on an exterior shot like that, a cool way to show depth is always having some nice overlaps. The more overlaps you have, the more sense of scale we're gonna get. And then this thing right here, it was this piece right here. And I pretty much just flipped it upside down. If you hit Control M, there you go. And then the sand was covering that part. So within my assets, I was just rotating them, duplicating them. I'm gonna turn this off for now. And then I had this spread, all over the place. This piece right here was this one right here. So I didn't use all of them, but I used a few of them here and there. And then this piece up here, this I used on this part right there. Now, as far as the design goes, right, I wanted to look more like a flower emerging kind of thing. But for my shot, I had to readjust it a little bit because it didn't look like the way I wanted it to look. If I had these guys just like that, it wasn't giving me an interesting silhouette. You know what I mean? I mean, it could have worked out, but then I felt like it looked more epic when I moved them around a little bit. It would have been something like this. And so for the sake of the shot, you can always, tweak your design a little bit. It's totally cool. So like right now, I felt like it looked much better this way. I had lines going in this way, inwards. These rocks up here, these are pretty simple. I straight up just used a Shift A mesh UV sphere, and then you can just go to tab, turn on proportional editing. And I also like to change this to lasso. Select this and kind of like just shape it up a little different. I want to go to wireframe for this actually. Something like that. Maybe you'll go up here with this, something wacky. Something that looks like a rock and organic. And once I had a shape of some sort, I right-clicked on it and I did shaved smooth. And so that's something like this. And then what you can do next is you literally just press Alt-D, make an instance, scale it down a little bit. Click again, Alt-D, do something like this. And you can probably go back to box. Alt-D, scale it down. And I just like started making instances for the most part, some small pieces, some bigger pieces, and just started mixing them in. And once I had a collection of some sort, it was actually this right here. Then I just started spreading it all over the place. I didn't really need to use a particle system. I feel like just using instances by clicking Alt-D, you can just place it wherever you want. You don't really need all that, because if you use a particle system, you're gonna have like greater render times, and then your scene's gonna be heavy as well. See, right now I have all this and I'm under 1 million polys right now. And because I always use instances, I never use Shift D. So if I hit Shift D, and then I want to change this a little bit, like I know I'm going to change it, then only then I'm going to use it. If I'm not going to change it, I'm just going to do Alt D. And let's say you did Alt D and you're like, okay, I want to change the design of this guy up here. Oh, but no, it's changing everything. So we have a solution for that as well. And for that, let's say if you click this and then you go up here and click that number. So now it's not an instance anymore. It's like its own mesh. So you can come up here, change it. It's not going to affect anything. So that's how it generally work. You know, I'll only use instances. And then if I want to change anything about my mesh, then I'll just make it real and then do whatever tweaks I want to do. Okay, so I had those pieces and it's literally the same kit. I just duplicated it. Now, initially, I had it where it was this way. It kind of works too. But then I felt like it'd be nice to have it pointing the camels up here. And this camel, I straight up got this from Sketchfab. So shout out to the guy who made it. The link is going to be on the description of my video. Definitely check his stuff out. It was really helpful. And this guy right here, this is the Monk pack from Terraform Studios, I believe. I want to show you guys my very first paint over pass on this. So this was my very first work in progress. Now I had some spikes coming out. I had a mountain up here, you know, those structures. You see that's how that structure looked like initially, right? And you know, we got some nice leading lines, but then there was this weird spotlight here that I forgot to delete. And I feel like was kind of busy in this area. And so I went back and then re-rendered everything. And so this was my second pass. So I kind of simplified down the ground plane a little bit. And then, you know, I still had those little pebbles, little, you know, rocks. We had those spikes as well. We got some sand as well. We got two more dudes up here standing. And then I also changed the design of the thing. And I actually forgot to put a black body node on it. That's why, you know, my shadows were so dark. And so I ended up putting that, and then, you know, I got nice softer shadows. And it's always good to have like soft shadows, right? Not soft, sorry, more lighter shadows, lighter and cooler shadows. It looks more realistic. And if you want to like darken them up, you can always do that in Photoshop. And then from here, I did a paint over, and this was the very first paint over pass. I was actually feeling pretty happy about it. But then I posted this on my Discord, and a good friend of mine, Oliver Beck, he gave me some feedback on it, and he was nice enough to even do a little bit of paint over. So pretty much his feedback was that I should probably move my centerpiece to the center, centerpiece to the center, and then just simplifying everything, because I felt like in my image right here, everything was to compare the two. If you think about it, like I had too much cool shit happening at the same time, right? And that's the tough part, right? When you're making these environment shots, when you're dealing with 3D. It's just so easy to get carried away that you just end up putting stuff all over the place. And in the final, I even removed these spikes because I felt like it wasn't really adding much to it. So that feedback was really helpful. And using that as a guide, then I rearranged everything, rearranged my entire scene. Then my next render looks something like this. So, you know, we got rid of those spikes. You know, I kind of squashed these sand dunes down a little bit. This big chunky piece, I totally just got rid of it because, you know, when I was painting over this piece, I was like, man, this piece isn't really doing much for me. So I ended up just removing that. And then this curve up here, we just got rid of it and just pointed it this way. That way, you just kind of get that kind of motion. This would have worked too, honestly, but I ended up changing it. And the other thing that I also did is that I added these little wooden planks up here. I thought it'd be cool to add some functionality to this design as well. Kind of show you that, okay, these dudes are gonna, you know, go up here, climb this way, then maybe, you know, jump up here, go up here, and then eventually, you know, reach to the top. So those were the changes that I made after I got some feedback, and I highly recommend getting feedback because I feel like it helps so much in just refining your pieces. Let's go back to Blender. I'm gonna talk about my texture right now. So I pretty much had three main textures. So I had a rock texture, a sand texture, and then a texture where they're both mixed. I talked about it in my previous video. I showed you guys my node system. So I'll show it to you one more time. It's pretty simple. I literally had two BSDF nodes. This right here is a rock texture. This right here is a sand texture, and both of them are going through a mix shader. And then the factor of that mix shader is going through a color ramp, and that color ramp is connected to a grunge texture. And then if I move my slider left and right, I can control how much sand I want to show and how much of the rock I want to show. So that was the texture setup. And then I used that same sand texture for the ground plane up here, and the same rock texture for some of these rocks that don't have any sand into it. And I got some really cool results, and that was about it because there wasn't really much going on in this environment up here. And then I also made some of these little buildings up here, just little, you know, old buildings, old worn out buildings. It was a lot of fun working on these. I think I have them somewhere down here. It was literally an image from textures.com. If I hit tab, go to UV editor, So I had one image. It was just an alpha image of these, you know, these, I don't even know what you would call this grunge, whatever. And then this other background, this right here, this part had another image for that, like this concrete texture. And I just did a cubic projection where you just hit you press A, select all your faces, and just do a cube projection. And that was it. And also, you know, right now being fully aware of the fact that these buildings are gonna be way out in the distance. So right now it doesn't really matter. I don't really have to put a roughness map and a displacement map and a normal map and all that, you know, all those. So we don't need all that. We don't need all those maps right now. So that's what I did. And to get these cuts, I straight up just used a Boolean. And it's pretty simple. And to make this work, you do have to go to edit preferences and go to add-ons. Make sure you have bool tool turned on. And then if I click this and then this, hit control number pad minus, I can, you know, get a difference, that kind of thing. I can cut through my mesh, either cut through it and scale it up a little bit. That's what I use for the door. And then if you want to get like a more better looking shape, you can just go hit tab. Actually, before you do that, you want to hit control A, scale, and then tab, select that edge, control B, bevel it, increase your depth. So yeah. And then once you're done, you're happy with your shape, you can click on the cube up here and hit control A, do visual geometry to mesh. So you can delete this now. And just like that, you have this little cute little building with a little opening up here. Honestly, that was it, you guys. Like, if I'm being honest with you guys, a lot of it has to do with just knowing how composition works, you know? And I highly recommend sketching out a little bit as well before you go into Blender. I just went straight into it because I didn't have the time. I was rushing this piece a lot, but definitely do sketch out a little bit. Definitely get feedback from people as well. Let's look at my render settings. I've repeated my render settings countless times in every video, and I'm not scared to do it every time because I feel like I don't want people to miss out on this, because my render times are literally so fast. And I have the world's oldest GPU. I'm out on 1070 and I can still get renders in under 5 minutes. So all you gotta do, first of all, cycle the GPU. You wanna go up here. You can check fast GI approximation. This will sometimes affect your lighting. Sometimes it doesn't. In my case, it was affecting my lighting a little bit. So let me turn it on and show you the difference. So I have it turned on right now. If I turn it off, you know, it's very subtle. You notice how like this is more warm? But when I turn it on, this part gets a little bit more cooler. And I feel like the color from this rock is like getting faded out as well. Very minor, but you know, it's something that does affect your render a little bit. So I usually play around with it. If I don't like it, I'll leave it off. But you can definitely click this for more faster results. So there's that one. I like putting my film on transparent. That way my HDRI doesn't render with it. I can easily replace my background with a different sky in Photoshop. And then you want to open up memory, click on use spatial splits and persistent data. And that's it. You just, you know, do these settings and your render times will be so much faster. And make sure, you also want to make sure your noise threshold is on 0.1. By default, it's 0.01. And your max samples are 200. You don't need anything more than that. And you should be good enough. And then for my render passes, let's go back. We're going to use Eevee for that. And for my render passes, I'll straight up, so the ones that I use the most, like religiously the most, so I will use an emission. Sorry, my bad. I will use environment because what it does, it gives you a cutout of everything. And then you can just use that as a clipping mask in Photoshop. I will use ambient occlusion. You can use this to add like little slight shadows to your renders. Because sometimes when you render stuff out, your shadows are, they get neglected, especially if you have a lower sample amount. And you can use ambient occlusion as a multiply. And then shadow is pretty good. I don't use it all the time, but with this, you can make a selection of your shadows. And, you know, if you want to tweak the color of your shadows a little bit, it's really helpful for that. So I did take shadow as well. Transparent, didn't really do anything. Diffuse light, not really. Diffuse color, no. I literally just go down the list and I'll just see what I'm getting. Specular, not really. Specular color, no. This isn't. If this is more like a hard surface design, I would use specular color to bring back some of the shininess. Volume light. So normally, I'll put a cube, a volumetric cube that'll add fog to it. But recently, I've stopped doing that because I feel like I would rather use a mist pass right here. Because with the mist pass, I can tweak my fog at will. Like I'm not, because if I put a volume box up here, it sometimes affects my lighting. And also if it's too dense, I cannot fix it again in Photoshop. Like I'll have to paint over it. But with the mist pass, I can literally like control how much fog I want in my scene. Now it is very cool if you do have a lighting setup where the sunlight is very strong and you have a fog in there, it'll give some really cool results where you might get some really cool looking god rays. So definitely do play around with that as well. But lately I haven't really been using that. And that's what the volume light is for. When you have a volumetric cube up there, it'll show you those god rays. Bloom works really well sometimes. If you have some cool lighting spots, you can put this on screen or color dodge. Works pretty well. And the normal, I barely use it. It's good at, I don't use it a whole lot. Skip it. And then mist, you can tweak your mist pass, like the darkness. If your mist pass reads well, it means you're in good shape. If you're having a good value structure with your mist pass. You click on the world settings right here. Oh, sorry. Yeah. World settings, mist pass, and you can just move these sliders left and right to tweak it. And then to save this render pass, if you hit F12 on your keyboard to render it, it won't render it out. You're gonna have to go to View, Viewport, Render Image, and then give it a sec. It's gonna render out, image, save. Okay. So, oh, by the way, this colorful structure, I have it. You can do this by going to Studio and hit on random. And then these up here, I just have these to block out the light. Let me show you the difference with and without it. So if I select these blockers and kind of just hide them. So you see that shadow that I was getting? It's gone. So that's why I use these to kind of like add some more shadow up here. I could have just used a cube. I don't know why I use these. I thought maybe I can get like some cool shapes on my shadows. I don't even know if it's working. But since it was an instance, it wasn't really affecting my poly count, so I was like, might as well. Which is why, you know, just always use instances, man. It saves so much. It'll save you so much memory. So that was pretty much it for the Blender part, if I'm being honest with you guys. I don't really do anything crazy with Blender, any crazy modeling or anything. I mostly do all of that in 3D code, especially when it's more organic structures. And then the next part is going to be Photoshop. So let's get into Photoshop and see what we got. So here's my Photoshop file. Let me go ahead and turn off some of these. So this was the render. So the first thing that I did was put a sky first. You know, it's pretty strong sunlight, daylight. So I would want like a nice blue sky for that. So I had this one image right here. And then another image right here on this side. And usually I'll just grab a couple of different images and just put them together, mask it out, things like that. And then here I just painted a little bit of that, you know, with a cloud brush. Just try to merge it as much as I can. And then I make a layer on top of my render called paint. And here I just do a little bit of painting where I clean up my image a little bit. You know, I have some of these rocks that are floating in the air. You know, some of these edges are pretty hard. Some of the sand up here, we got like artifacts up here. You know, little things like that. Just zooming in and just cleaning those up. And then here I had some mist, and I actually ended up getting rid of it because I felt like it was a little too distracting. So, but initially I had these, so I had that in a layer. So notice how I always put my paint layer below all the effects like the render passes and the bloom and volume and all that. It's just easier. And then I had a lighten layer. I painted a little bit up here so that pretty much I wanted to pop out this guy's silhouette right now. If I hit Control Y, he's kind of getting mixed up with all of this. So with lighten, I painted it out so that he gets silhouetted out a little bit. We had ambient occlusion up here. So very subtle, but ambient occlusion is adding a little bit of, is bringing back some of the little shadows back on the things up here. And then bloom, put that on color dodge, and you know, it kind of brightened up this part a little bit. Shadow, I didn't really use this for anything. I was gonna, but I ended up just getting rid of it because I felt like it was making everything like super black. So, but it was good for making like selections of just my shadow. Now we had the mist pass. So the mist pass was actually this right here, and actually did not update these, but I got rid of these spikes, so I ended up painting over them a little bit. And let me, so initially it's on normal, opacity is 100. and it's actually masked out right now. Let's disable it. This is what it looked like. So I usually change the color of my mist pass to the color of my fog, and then if you put this, and then I'll mask out. So right now it looks like this right now, right? Because I want this fog mainly to be like up here, and I'm gonna change it to screen, either screen or lighten. I like using screen because if you do lighten, you get these hot spots that look pretty ugly. So, and then from here I'm gonna lower down my opacity and just put it at a spot where I think it's good enough. Now if you were super far away, I'd do something like this, but we're not that far away from the structure, so I thought I'd just add a little bit. And then if you go to, and then I had the same mist pass, and this time I put it on multiply, and that part was just up here affecting the foreground elements. Once again, masked out. And if you want, you can also hit Control L, and by moving a slider left and right, you can tweak. Oh, actually, my bad. Let me disable my layer mask first. Okay. You kind of feel like move the slider left and right, you can tweak how much of it is being affected, right? Because when I'm moving this to the right, the image is becoming more darker, right? And so the lighter part is going away. On the other hand, let's hit cancel. If I move this part this way, it's gonna add more fog, kind of like that. So I like having that control. And let's try that for that was from multiply, right? So it was making everything darker. Let's disable this. Control L. I do this, the fog is it's going away from the foreground, but then it's also like changing the color a little bit, so you want to like use it sparingly. And if I move this slider, it's getting more foggy and more weird looking. So there are these things up here. And then with this, you can use the middle part as well to kind of control things a little bit. So that's why I like using mist pads. You get these like cool little controls that you can use. But anyways, once I had that, let's turn this on, turn that on. Let me enable my mask. And then I actually had a hue saturation slider, but then I ended up getting rid of it. It wasn't doing much. And then I had this curves where I thought it'd be cool to add some highlights, but I didn't really use that either in the end. And then I made another layer where I painted a little bit more, and this time this was above all the render passes, just to clean things up a little bit, add a little bit of brush strokes here and there. And then I used a color lookup filter, and it was pretty simple. Let's put it on normal. I feel like I wanted to bring back, if you go up here, do color lookup, and then you can click on this and just like go through this list up here. I went on crisp warm because I wanted to bring back some of the warm colors, and we're gonna enable that. And then I actually put it on color dodge just to bring back some of that, some bright areas. And then here I created a layer with just brush strokes. Ideally you want to use like a texture brush of some sort. Pull down like lines like that. A bit bigger. And then you can just put it on overlay. Lower down the opacity a little bit. And yeah, you just get these nice little brush strokes. I made mine a lot thinner. So yeah, they were like very light as well. And so when I reach a point where I'm happy with my painting, I'll usually make a copy of my render pass and kind of just toggle this on and off and see if everything's looking good. Also hit Control Y to make sure the value read is good, which I think it worked pretty well. I mean, we had a good value structure here. Could be wrong, I don't know. And another thing is good to have is threshold. The threshold up here, if you can read your image with the threshold, it means it looks looking good. To make threshold work properly, sometimes you have to kind of move the slider left and right. So like, it's reading pretty well. We have the structure up here, path going this way, some of the sand going this way. That's good. And then here I had a little bit of motion blur that I added on the side. I literally make a copy of all my layers, merge them, and then go to filter, blur, filter, blur, and then motion blur, either motion blur or Gaussian blur, whatever. And then this right here is a high pass filter. So if I zoom in, it's very subtle. It's kind of like sharpening things up a little bit, especially things like in the distance. And the way I did that is that I made a copy of everything again, merged it, and then filter other high pass. So that's it for my main paint over pass. So this is pretty much the workflow that I used to make this image. But this should be it for today, you guys. All right, you guys, so that should be all for today. Thank you so much for coming by and watching this video. If you haven't already subscribed, make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you don't miss out any of the stuff that I put out. And we'll keep working on this project. I'll keep working on some more shots in the coming weeks as well. Tag along and follow me on my journey. And thanks for being here. I'll see you guys in the next one.